Chapter 1. The Dark Path. David and Emily were an American couple backpacking across Europe. A few days ago, they had set off on a nature hike at the foothills of the Swiss Alps. However, their map had led them astray. They had been wandering through the forest for hours, finding no signs of civilization. As the sun began to set, a thick fog rolled in, clinging to their skin like an icy hand, making every step feel more ominous. "I think we should find shelter," Emily said, shivering. David looked at the map in his hands, but it made little sense. Their GPS had stopped working. "Maybe there's a town ahead," he murmured, though he felt a growing sense of unease. As they moved through the mist, they came across an area surrounded by iron fences. Beyond the gate lay an old cemetery, its tombstones broken and covered in moss. Some were leaning, others had completely toppled over. The entrance gate was rusted, with Latin words etched into the metal. "No return." Emily took a hesitant step back. "Do we have to go in?" David looked around. There was no other path. "Maybe we'll find a shelter or a way out inside." Reluctantly, Emily nodded and followed him. They pushed open the gate and stepped inside. The cemetery was larger than expected. The tombstones were scattered haphazardly, and the wind howled through the stones, sounding like eerie whispers. Suddenly, Emily tripped over a gravestone and fell. David knelt beside her. As she pushed herself up, she noticed the inscription on the stone. It was in Latin, but below it, an old English translation was visible. "Those who rest here are never forgotten." At that moment, a whisper echoed from the depths of the cemetery. "Do not leave." Emily gasped and looked around, but no one was there. Chapter 2. The Heart of the Cemetery. David helped Emily to her feet, but every step forward only made the fog grow denser. The air became heavier, and the tombstones seemed to shift and change. The path they had just taken was now gone. "We need to get out of here," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. David felt the same dread, but he knew they were lost. Just then, a massive monument appeared in the center of the cemetery. It was an ancient structure, ominous and towering. When they read the inscription on its surface, their hearts nearly stopped. "Those who come here stay forever." David suddenly froze. His eyes were blank, staring into the void. Emily shook him. "David, we have to leave." But he didn't respond. It was as if an invisible force had taken hold of him. Emily turned in panic, scanning the area. That's when she saw them, shadowy figures emerging from behind the tombstones. They had no faces, their forms flickering like mist, moving silently towards them. Emily let out a scream and stumbled back. One of the figures spoke, its voice a hollow whisper that echoed through the graveyard. "He is now one of us." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded wildly. She tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. An unseen force anchored her in place. David remained motionless as the mist swallowed him. His eyes turned pale, and his body trembled slightly before he vanished among the shadows. Emily let out a final blood-curdling scream, but no one heard it. Chapter 3. Oblivion. By morning, the cemetery was silent once more. The mist had lifted. Birds chirped in the trees. It was as if nothing had ever happened. But David and Emily were gone. No trace of them remained. At the cemetery's entrance, 2 new tombstones stood side by side. Their inscriptions read, Emily Carter, 2025 David Miller, 2025. No one would remember them, because those who came here were forgotten, and the cemetery waited patiently for its next guests.